Sometimes the most powerful words come from the deepest pain. On a cold February morning, millions of people around the world stopped scrolling through their social media feeds when they saw her face. Catherine, known for her bright smile and positive energy, looked different this time. Her eyes held a weight that spoke of sleepless nights and whispered prayers. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a photograph close to her heart. What she was about to share would not just mark World Cancer Day, but would become a beacon of hope for countless families fighting battles nobody talks about. In less than 5 minutes, her words would travel across continents, bring strangers to tears, and remind the world that behind every cancer statistic is a human story worth telling. This is that story. This is how one woman's courage to speak her truth became a movement that touched millions of hearts and changed how we talk about cancer forever. Catherine Martinez had always been the type of person who lit up every room she entered. At 34 years old, she was a successful marketing executive, a devoted wife to her husband David, and a mother to twin daughters, Emma and Sophia, who had just turned 8. Her Instagram account was filled with pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, and everyday moments that captured the joy of a life well lived. To her 50,000 followers, Catherine represented the perfect balance of career success and family happiness. But perfection, as Catherine would soon learn, was nothing more than a carefully curated illusion. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in September. Catherine was getting ready for work when she noticed a small lump in her breast while showering. Her first instinct was to dismiss it. She was young, healthy, and had no family history of breast cancer. The lump was probably nothing more than a cyst or hormonal change. She made a mental note to mention it to her doctor at her next routine appointment and continued with her day as if nothing had happened. For 3 weeks, Catherine pushed the discovery to the back of her mind. She was busy with a major campaign launch at work, planning the twins' birthday party, and managing the countless responsibilities that came with juggling career and motherhood. Every morning, she would feel the lump during her shower, and every morning she would convince herself it was getting smaller. But deep down, a small voice of worry was growing louder. David noticed the change in his wife before Catherine even realized it herself. She had become quieter during dinner conversations, more distracted when helping the girls with homework, and he caught her staring into space with a look of concern he had never seen before. When he asked if everything was okay, Catherine would smile and say she was just tired from work. She did not want to worry him over what was probably nothing. The turning point came during Emma's soccer game on a Saturday afternoon. Catherine was sitting on the bleachers cheering for her daughter when she felt a sharp pain in her chest. The pain was not unbearable, but it was enough to make her gasp and place her hand over the area where the lump was. Another mother sitting nearby asked if she was okay, and Catherine realized she could not keep pretending everything was fine. That evening, after putting the girls to bed, Catherine finally told David about the lump. She had planned to bring it up casually, but the moment she started speaking, tears began flowing down her cheeks. David held her close and insisted they call her doctor first thing Monday morning. He did not say it out loud, but Catherine could see the fear in his eyes too. Doctor. Sarah Chen had been Catherine's physician for over 10 years. She was known for her calm demeanor and thorough approach to patient care. When Catherine described the lump during her appointment, Dr. Chen maintained her professional composure while conducting a physical examination. She could feel the lump immediately, and while she tried to reassure Catherine that many lumps were benign, she scheduled an immediate mammogram and ultrasound. The waiting room at the imaging center was filled with women of all ages. Some looked nervous, others appeared routine about the process, and a few were accompanied by family members who held their hands. Catherine sat alone, having insisted that David stay at work since she was convinced this was just a precautionary measure. She scrolled through her phone, responding to work emails and looking at pictures of the girls to keep her mind occupied. The mammogram technician, Lisa, had performed thousands of these procedures. She was skilled at reading the subtle changes in a patient's face during the process and knew how to provide comfort without giving false hope. After the mammogram, Catherine was asked to wait while the radiologist reviewed the images. 30 minutes later, Lisa returned with a gentle smile and asked Catherine to come back for an ultrasound. During the ultrasound, Catherine watched the technician's face carefully, looking for any sign of what the images might reveal. The room was quiet except for the soft humming of the machine and the occasional click as the technician captured images. Catherine found herself holding her breath, as if staying perfectly still could somehow change whatever the screen was showing. Dr. James Morrison, the radiologist, was known for his direct but compassionate communication style. When he entered the room to speak with Catherine, she knew immediately that the news was not what she had hoped for. He explained that the imaging showed a mass that had characteristics concerning for malignancy. He was careful to emphasize that a biopsy was needed for a definitive diagnosis, but he wanted Catherine to be prepared for the possibility that this could be cancer. The word cancer hit Catherine like a physical blow. She had heard it said about other people, distant relatives and celebrities, but never in reference to herself. Dr. Morrison continued speaking about next steps, biopsy procedures and timeframes, but Catherine felt like she was hearing him from underwater. Her mind immediately jumped to her daughters. How would she tell them? How would she protect them from this fear that was now consuming her? The drive home from the medical center was the longest 20 minutes of Catherine's life. She called David from the car, her voice shaking as she explained what the doctor had found. David left work immediately and met her at home, where they sat in their kitchen and held each other while Catherine cried for the first time since learning the news. The biopsy was scheduled for the following week, 5 days that felt like an eternity. Catherine tried to maintain normalcy for her family, but every routine activity felt different now. Making breakfast for the girls, helping them with homework, and tucking them into bed at night all carried the weight of uncertainty. She found herself memorizing their faces, their laughs, their little habits, as if she were trying to store up these moments in case her future with them was going to be different than she had planned. Catherine decided not to tell the girls about the biopsy until she had definitive results. She did not want to frighten them unnecessarily, but keeping the secret from her own children felt like carrying a physical burden. Emma, who was particularly observant, asked her mother several times why she seemed sad. Catherine would force a smile and deflect the question, but each lie felt like another weight added to her chest. The night before the biopsy, Catherine sat in her home office and stared at her computer screen. She had been working on a social media campaign for a luxury handbag brand, but the images of beautiful models and expensive accessories felt surreal and meaningless. She closed her laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where she and David had planned to raise their children and grow old together. David found her there an hour later, still standing at the window. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together in silence. They both knew that tomorrow could bring news that would change their lives forever, that in that moment they focused on the warmth of being together, and the sound of their daughter's peaceful breathing coming from down the hall. The biopsy procedure itself was quick and relatively painless, but the emotional impact was significant. As Catherine lay on the examination table, she thought about all the women who had been in this same position before her. She wondered about their outcomes, their fears, and their strength. She realized that cancer was not just a disease that happened to other people in other families. It was a possibility that existed for everyone, and today it was her turn to face that possibility. Dr. Chen called with the results 3 days later. Catherine was at work when her phone rang, and she stepped into an empty conference room to take the call. The words invasive ductal carcinoma would be forever etched in her memory. Stage 2 breast cancer. Treatable but requiring surgery, chemotherapy and radiation. As Dr. Office, Chen explained the treatment plan and discussed oncology referrals. Catherine felt her carefully constructed world shifting beneath her feet. That evening, Catherine and David told Emma and Sophia that Mommy had cancer but that the doctors were going to help her get better. The girls asked innocent questions about whether cancer hurt and if Mommy would have to stay in the hospital. Catherine answered each question with as much honesty as she felt they could handle, while David held both girls close and promised them that the family would get through this together. The first oncology appointment was overwhelming. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez was highly recommended and had 20 years of experience treating breast cancer, but sitting in her office and discussing chemotherapy protocols made everything feel terrifyingly real. Catherine learned about hair loss, nausea, fatigue, and the dozens of other side effects that would become part of her daily reality for the next several months. As October turned into November, Catherine began the process of preparing for treatment. She researched wigs, stocked up on comfortable clothing, and arranged for additional childcare help. She also made the difficult decision to take a leave of absence from work, something that felt like losing another piece of her identity. The night before her first chemotherapy treatment, Catherine looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for a long time. She studied her face, her hair, and her body, knowing that all of these things would change in the coming months. She thought about the woman she had been just 2 months ago. Someone who worried about meeting project deadlines and planning birthday parties. That woman felt like a stranger now. The chemotherapy infusion center at Regional Medical Center was not what Catherine had expected. Instead of the sterile, frightening environment she had imagined, the space was designed to be as comfortable as possible. Large windows let in natural light. Each chair was equipped with a television and adjustable table, and the nursing staff moved through the room with a combination of efficiency and warmth that immediately put patients at ease. Catherine's first treatment was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November. David had taken the day off work to accompany her, and her mother, Maria, had driven in from the next town to watch the girls. As they sat in the waiting room, Catherine noticed the other patients around her. There was an elderly man reading a newspaper, a woman about her own age knitting what looked like a baby blanket, and a teenager with a bright pink wig playing games on her phone. Each person represented a different story, a different battle, but they were all there for the same reason. Nurse Jennifer Williams had been working in oncology for 15 years. She had guided hundreds of patients through their first chemotherapy treatments and had developed an intuitive sense for what each person needed to feel safe and supported. When she called Catherine's name, her warm smile and confident manner immediately helped ease some of the anxiety that had been building for days. The process of receiving chemotherapy was both more and less frightening than Catherine had imagined. The IV insertion was quick and relatively painless, and the pre-medications to prevent nausea made her feel drowsy and calm. David sat beside her chair, occasionally reading aloud from a magazine or simply holding her hand. They talked quietly about everyday things, the girls' school activities, weekend plans, and anything that felt normal and familiar. About halfway through the treatment, Catherine struck up a conversation with the woman in the chair next to her. Linda Chen, no relation to Catherine's primary doctor, was 62 years old and receiving her fourth round of chemotherapy for ovarian cancer. She had brought a large bag filled with snacks, magazines, a tablet loaded with movies, and what she called her chemo survival kit. Linda's matter-of-fact approach to treatment was both inspiring and educational for Catherine. Linda explained that the anticipation of chemotherapy was often worse than the actual experience. She shared practical tips about managing side effects, the importance of staying hydrated, and the value of asking for help when needed. Most importantly, she talked about how cancer treatment had taught her to appreciate small moments and everyday pleasures in ways she had never experienced before. The first few days after chemotherapy were manageable. Catherine felt tired and slightly nauseous, but she was able to maintain most of her normal activities. She picked up the girls from school, helped with homework, and even managed to cook dinner for the family. She began to think that perhaps the treatment would not be as difficult as she had feared. But by the second week, the cumulative effects of the chemotherapy began to take hold. Catherine woke up one morning feeling like she had been hit by a truck. Every muscle in her body ached, her head felt foggy, and the smell of coffee, which she had always loved, made her feel violently nauseous. David found her sitting on the bathroom floor, crying from exhaustion and frustration. This became the new rhythm of Catherine's life. Good days followed by difficult days, energy followed by exhaustion, hope followed by fear. She learned to recognize the patterns of her body's response to treatment and began planning her activities around her energy levels. On good days, she would take the girls to the park or help them with school projects. On difficult days, they would have movie marathons on the couch, and David would handle dinner and bedtime routines. The hardest part was not the physical side effects, but watching how the cancer diagnosis affected her family. Emma, who had always been a confident and outgoing child, became clingy and anxious. She started having nightmares and would often crawl into Catherine's bed in the middle of the night. Sophia, who was naturally more reserved, became even quieter and seemed to be carrying worries that were too heavy for an 8-year-old. David was trying to be strong for everyone, but Catherine could see the toll it was taking on him. He had taken on additional household responsibilities while continuing to work full-time, and he was constantly worried about Catherine's health and the girls' emotional well-being. Some evenings, Catherine would find him sitting alone in their bedroom, staring at nothing, clearly overwhelmed by the weight of everything their family was facing. In December, Catherine made the decision to share her cancer diagnosis with her social media followers. She had been absent from posting for weeks, and friends and colleagues were beginning to ask questions. She was also inspired by Linda and several other patients she had met who spoke openly about the importance of cancer awareness and the need to break down the stigma surrounding the disease. Her first post about cancer was simple and honest. She shared a photo of herself in the infusion center, wearing a warm hat and managed a genuine smile. The caption explained her diagnosis and treatment plan, expressed gratitude for the medical team caring for her, and asked for privacy as her family navigated this challenging time. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments poured in from friends, family members, colleagues, and complete strangers. People shared their own cancer stories, offered prayers and support, and expressed admiration for Catherine's courage in speaking publicly about her experience. Many followers thanked her for being open about something that so many people face in silence. But it was not just the support that impacted Catherine. It was the stories that people shared in response to her post. Women wrote about their own breast cancer journeys. Family members described watching loved ones battle different types of cancer, and survivors offered hope and practical advice. Catherine realized that cancer was not an isolated experience, but part of a larger community of people who understood fear, uncertainty, and the daily courage required to face a life-threatening illness. As winter progressed, Catherine continued to document her treatment journey on social media. She posted pictures from chemotherapy sessions, shared tips for managing side effects, and wrote honestly about both the difficult and inspiring moments of cancer treatment. Her follower count began to grow as people discovered her authentic and hopeful approach to sharing her experience. One of her most popular posts was about the day she decided to cut her hair short before it started falling out from chemotherapy. She had been dreading hair loss since the beginning of treatment, but she realized that taking control of the process would be more empowering than waiting for it to happen gradually. She and David turned it into a family event, with the girls helping to choose a short hairstyle that made Catherine feel beautiful and confident. The photo she shared showed her new short haircut, surrounded by her daughters who were beaming with pride. The caption talked about how cancer had taught her that beauty and strength came in many different forms, and that she was learning to find power in adapting to change rather than fighting against it. The post received thousands of likes and hundreds of comments from people who were inspired by her positive attitude and family's unity. By February, Catherine had completed 4 rounds of chemotherapy and was preparing for surgery. The treatments had been successful in shrinking the tumor, and her oncologist was optimistic about the surgical outcome. Catherine felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as she approached this next phase of treatment. Surgery would mark the end of chemotherapy, but it would also represent another significant step in her cancer journey. The night before surgery, Catherine spent time writing in a journal she had started keeping during treatment. Writing had become a way for her to process her emotions and document the changes she was experiencing, both physical and emotional. She wrote about her fears and hopes, her gratitude for her medical team and family support, and her growing understanding of what it meant to live with cancer. She also wrote about the incredible community of people she had discovered through her social media posts. Women from all over the world were following her journey and sharing their own stories. Some were currently in treatment, others were survivors, and many were family members supporting loved ones with cancer. Catherine had never intended to become an advocate or spokesperson, but she realized that her openness was providing comfort and information to people who needed it. Catherine's surgeon, Dr. Michael Thompson, was able to remove the tumor with clear margins, and the pathology report showed that the chemotherapy had been effective in eliminating any remaining cancer cells in the surrounding tissue. Catherine woke up from anesthesia feeling hopeful for the first time in months. David was there when she opened her eyes, and his tears of relief told her everything she needed to know about the outcome. Recovery from surgery was different from chemotherapy, but it brought its own challenges. Catherine had to relearn simple activities, like lifting her arms above her head and carrying groceries. Physical therapy helped restore her strength and range of motion, but the process was slow and sometimes frustrating. She documented this phase of recovery as well, sharing both the victories and setbacks with her online community. As spring approached, Catherine prepared for the final phase of her treatment, radiation therapy. Unlike chemotherapy, which affected her entire body, radiation would be targeted specifically to the area where the tumor had been located. The treatments were daily for 6 weeks, but each session lasted only a few minutes. Catherine was grateful that this phase would allow her to maintain more of her normal routine, while still receiving the treatment she needed. During radiation treatment, Catherine began to think seriously about what life after cancer would look like. She had been changed by this experience in ways that she was still discovering, and she knew that returning to her old life exactly as it had been was neither possible nor desirable. She had learned things about herself, her family, and her priorities that she wanted to carry forward into whatever came next. World Cancer Day arrived on February 4th, exactly 1 year after Catherine had completed her final radiation treatment. As she sat in her home office that morning, looking through hundreds of photos from her cancer journey, she felt compelled to create something meaningful to mark this significant date. Over the past months, her social media following had grown to over 200,000 people, and she had received thousands of messages from individuals and families affected by cancer. Catherine had been planning to write a simple post about cancer awareness, but as she began typing, something deeper emerged. She found herself crafting a tribute not just to her own experience, but to every person who had shared their story with her, every family member who had provided support, and every medical professional who had guided her through treatment. The post grew longer,
and more personal than anything she had ever shared.
She included a photo that had never been posted before, a picture David had taken of her during her third chemotherapy treatment. In the image, Catherine was sleeping in the infusion chair, her hand still connected to the IV, but her face was peaceful, and there was a slight smile on her lips. David had captured the moment when she had drifted off while listening to a playlist the girls had created for her, filled with their favorite songs and encouraging messages they had recorded. The tribute began with Catherine reflecting on how cancer had initially felt like an ending, the end of certainty, the end of feeling safe in her own body, the end of believing that terrible things happen to other people. But over the course of her treatment and recovery, she had discovered that cancer was also a beginning. It was the beginning of understanding her own strength, the beginning of deeper relationships with family and friends, and the beginning of a community she never knew existed. Catherine wrote about Linda, the woman she had met during her first chemotherapy session, who had become not just a friend but a mentor in navigating life with cancer. Linda had completed her treatment successfully and was now volunteering at the Cancer Centre, providing support to newly diagnosed patients. Catherine described how Linda's matter-of-fact approach to treatment had helped her realize that cancer was not a battle to be won or lost, but an experience to be lived through with as much grace and courage as possible. The tribute included stories about other people Catherine had met along the way. There was Marcus, a 17-year-old who was receiving treatment for leukemia, and who had taught Catherine about finding joy in small moments. Despite being in the middle of what should have been his senior year of high school, Marcus maintained an incredible sense of humor and had organized a support group for young adults with cancer. His energy and optimism had inspired not only Catherine, but many other patients in the treatment center. Catherine also wrote about the medical professionals who had cared for her. She described Dr. Rodriguez, her oncologist, who had somehow managed to deliver difficult news with honesty while maintaining hope. Nurse Jennifer, who had made every chemotherapy session feel safe and comfortable, remembering details about Catherine's family and always asking about the girls' school activities. Dr. Thompson, her surgeon, who had taken time to explain every aspect of the procedure and had called personally to check on her recovery. But the most powerful part of the tribute was Catherine's reflection on how cancer had changed her perspective on what mattered most in life. She wrote about mornings when she would wake up and feel grateful simply for feeling good enough to make breakfast for her family. She described the way that watching Emma and Sophia laugh during family movie nights had become more precious than any professional achievement she had ever experienced. Catherine shared how cancer had taught her to ask for help, something that had always been difficult for her. She had learned to accept offers from friends who wanted to bring meals, from colleagues who offered to help with work projects, and from family members who volunteered to help with childcare. Accepting help had not made her feel weak. Instead, it had shown her how many people cared about her family and wanted to be part of their support system. The tribute also addressed the fear that continued to be part of her daily experience, even after successful treatment. Catherine was honest about the anxiety that came with every follow-up appointment, every routine scan, and every unusual ache or pain that made her worry about recurrence. She explained that learning to live with uncertainty had been one of the most challenging aspects of cancer survivorship, but that it had also taught her to appreciate each healthy day as a gift. Catherine wrote about the online community that had developed around her social media posts. People from around the world had connected with each other through her page, sharing resources, offering support, and celebrating milestones together. She had received messages from women who credited her posts with encouraging them to get mammograms that led to early detection of their own cancers. Others had written to say that her honest portrayal of treatment had helped them feel less afraid when facing their own cancer diagnoses. One story that particularly moved Catherine was from Sarah, a young mother in Australia who had been diagnosed with breast cancer shortly after seeing Catherine's early posts about treatment. Sarah had followed Catherine's journey throughout her own treatment and had adopted many of the coping strategies Catherine had shared. Sarah's recent message included photos of her ringing the bell to celebrate the completion of her own treatment, crediting Catherine's openness with helping her feel less alone during the most frightening time of her life. Catherine also used the tribute to address some of the misconceptions about cancer that she had encountered. She wrote about how cancer was not a result of personal failures or negative thinking, but a disease that could affect anyone, regardless of lifestyle, diet, or attitude. She emphasized the importance of supporting cancer patients without judgment and avoiding phrases like, "everything happens for a reason," or "God only gives you what you can handle," that, while well-intentioned, could feel dismissive of the very real suffering that cancer caused. The tribute discussed the financial impact of cancer treatment, something that was rarely talked about openly, but affected nearly every family dealing with cancer. Catherine acknowledged that her family had been fortunate to have good insurance and supportive employers, But she recognized that many families face devastating financial hardship in addition to the emotional and physical challenges of treatment. She used her platform to raise awareness about organizations that provided financial assistance to cancer patients and families. Catherine wrote about the importance of supporting cancer research and the hope that future patients would have access to treatments that were less toxic and more effective than what was currently available. She had become involved with several cancer organizations as a volunteer and advocate, using her social media presence to promote fundraising events and awareness campaigns. Near the end of the tribute, Catherine addressed her daughters directly, acknowledging how cancer had affected their childhood and expressing gratitude for their resilience and strength. She wrote about how Emma and Sophia had adapted to having a mother who sometimes needed to rest during the day, who had lost her hair and worn scarves and wigs for months, and who had emotions that were sometimes closer to the surface than before cancer. Catherine shared how her daughters had surprised her with their capacity for empathy and understanding. Emma had organized a lemonade stand to raise money for cancer research and had presented Catherine with a handmade certificate declaring her the bravest mum in the world. Sophia had started a tradition of leaving encouraging notes in Catherine's lunchbox and had learned to braid scarves in creative ways when Catherine's hair was growing back. The tribute concluded with Catherine's reflection on what World Cancer Day meant to her personally. It was not just a day to raise awareness about cancer as a disease, but a day to honor the courage of everyone who faced cancer: patients, families, caregivers, and medical professionals. It was a day to remember those who had lost their lives to cancer and to celebrate those who were thriving despite their diagnoses. Catherine ended the post with a direct message to anyone who might be facing a cancer diagnosis or supporting someone who was. She encouraged people to seek support, to be patient with themselves during treatment, to celebrate small victories, and to remember that cancer was just one part of their story, not the defining chapter. The photo she chose to accompany the tribute was a recent family picture taken during Emma and Sophia's 9th birthday celebration. Catherine's hair had grown back, though it was curlier and slightly darker than before treatment. She was wearing a pink ribbon pin that had become her signature accessory, and she was surrounded by her family, all of them smiling genuinely and looking toward the future with hope. When Catherine hit publish on the post, she had no idea of the response it would generate. Within minutes, comments began pouring in from followers around the world. Cancer survivors shared their own stories, family members expressed gratitude for Catherine's honesty, and medical professionals thanked her for humanizing the cancer experience. The post was shared thousands of times within the first hour and continued to reach new audiences throughout the day. Major cancer organizations reached out to Catherine, asking to feature her tribute in their World Cancer Day campaigns. News outlets requested interviews about her story and her perspective on cancer awareness, but the messages that meant the most to Catherine came from individuals who said that her words had given them hope, courage, or simply the feeling that they were not alone in their cancer experience. The response to the tribute confirmed what Catherine had suspected over the course of her cancer journey, that people were hungry for honest, authentic stories about dealing with serious illness. Too often, cancer was portrayed in either overly optimistic or unnecessarily frightening ways. Catherine's approach of acknowledging both the difficulties and the growth that could come from a cancer experience resonated with people who were looking for a more nuanced understanding of what it meant to live with cancer. In the weeks following World Cancer Day, Catherine made the decision to write a book about her cancer experience. Publishers had been contacting her for months, but she had not felt ready to take on such a large project. The response to her tribute convinced her that there was a need for her perspective and that writing a book could reach even more people who might benefit from her story. Catherine also began speaking at cancer centers and support groups, sharing her story and the lessons she had learned about navigating treatment and survivorship. She discovered that she had a natural ability to connect with audiences and that her authentic approach to discussing cancer helped people feel more comfortable asking questions and expressing their own fears and concerns. As spring arrived and Catherine marked the first anniversary of completing her treatment, she reflected on how much her life had changed since her cancer diagnosis. She had returned to work part-time but had negotiated a schedule that allowed for better work-life balance. She prioritized family time and personal relationships in ways she had not before cancer. She had also found a new sense of purpose in cancer advocacy and supporting others who were facing similar challenges. Catherine's tribute on World Cancer Day had become more than just a social media post. It had become a testament to the power of sharing authentic stories about difficult experiences and the way that openness and vulnerability could create connections and healing for entire communities. Her words had traveled around the world and had touched the lives of people she would never meet, proving that sometimes the most powerful gift we can give others is the courage to tell our truth.